This is not a problem just with Uncharted. This is a problem across games, which is why, as I've gotten older and I've worked in games longer, I've just started to abandon AAA because it's the same shit. Bluefire cares. He says, I absolutely agree. I've been getting burned out from AAA games. Most games just feel like the same third-person RPG.
So in case you didn't know, the man you just saw there was David Jaffe. He is literally the reason God of War exists. He was in charge of the original God of War game way back when it released in 2005, and now he's taken to the internet to rant about all things video games. There's plenty of quality channels out there that have stood themselves in good stead when becoming an authority on video games, but it can't be denied that when that authority happens to be someone from the inside with that extra depth of insight, it's a pretty engrossing perspective to hear from. And of course it's just pure conjecture to say so, but the impression that I get of David Jaffe is that he's a pretty angry guy. He's fairly upset about the world and the way things work. For example, back when God of War first started development, before Jaffe and his team even knew what Kratos would look like, he came into work and he asked his concept artists to just turn up as pissed off as possible, just to see what kind of angry characters they'd come up with. Perhaps like then, Jaffe is still kind of just mad at the world, just like Kratos. In what I'm about to discuss, the man is not a happy chappy with how the AAA industry is turning out, and it's his opinion here that chimed with me when I discovered his channel. Why should any of us care what the man has to say? Well, aside from the obvious, Jaffe has headed games like Twisted Metal and Drawn to Death, after leaving Sony Santa Monica after God of War's second installment. As someone to criticise the state of video games today, he makes for a good candidate. He doesn't just know how to make games, he knows how to make excellent games, with his Twisted Metal series and God of War both being ranked among IGN's top 25 games of all time for the PS2. So the man's got that know-how. And as you can gather from that little clip at the start of the video there when I discovered his channel, I found him ranting about AAA games and how formulaic they've become, but he doesn't single out a game that is popularly disliked. His mantra for the shittiness of AAA game design, at least to him, even applies so far as Uncharted.
I see this and I say, how can you guys not recognize that this is the same fucking game over and over and over and over? And maybe you're saying we can recognize it. It doesn't bother us. Totally fair. But it does bother me.
It's a snippet from a live stream where one of his viewers asked him what he thought about AAA games, and several expletives later he highlights Uncharted as a sticking point. He takes his time during the stream to get side-by-side gameplay of Uncharted 1 and Uncharted 4, and aside from graphics, user interface and the grapple found in the fourth game, I gotta say, the man's got a point when he says they're exactly the same game. I might get a bit of backlash in the comments for this, but after playing every Uncharted game except the PSP and Vita releases, I always kind of felt the same way, but I never knew how to put it into words. It's why I've personally always enjoyed the Tomb Raider reboots more than Uncharted, because there's just more going on there in terms of gameplay. But by the time I was about halfway through the third game, for me, Uncharted started to get a little bit numbingly predictable. It reaches those high review scores through none other than that crazy high-budget pizzazz, graphics, and story. The latter, in my opinion, isn't done well, because of that predictability that I mentioned. While characters are very likeable, by the third game the formula was clear to me. Nathan discovers awesome object he simply must have. The baddies are after it too. Nathan goes through trials and tribulations and finds the trinket. Bad guy explodes through war or some dramatic shit, says, "Ah ha ha ha, you've done my work for me, Drake, you fool." Nathan Drake escapes death-defying thing that the bad guy has put him in, catches up to the bad guy, beats his ass, both lose the trinket forever and consider it's probably best, and everyone goes home with a smile on their face. It's pretty much the same formula for Harry Potter. That has me going, all right, yeah, Voldemort again. As I said, I'm probably going to piss off a lot of people saying all this stuff, but hey, those games are fun. There's no denying it, and they're made by one of the most skilled teams on the planet. If 3 or 4 were your first Uncharted experiences, you'll have the benefit of not knowing all of this, and it's probably been a blast. But when all is said and done, I agree with Jaffe, because Uncharted is this visual marvel for all of about 5 hours, and then you're done with it. But the real clincher of this video today is what David Jaffe's little rant there made me realise. It's a kind of death knell for any one thing if it's successful too many times over. It starts to get complacent with its audience. It starts to fear taking risks and trying new things. It begins to think that it can cut new corners because people will just lap that shit up regardless. A perfect example of this is Fallout 76. Bethesda got complacent, so they lazily designed 76, brazenly assuming people would buy it in droves just because it had Fallout on the box. It's like an entertainment phenomenon, where if something gets so successful for so long, it will begin to eat itself. Don't know if any of you are still watching The Walking Dead, but the gun effects in that have become so incredibly shit. The sound effects are awful, there's no recoil, and spent ammo casings are nowhere to be seen. The show has enough money to spend around $1 to $2 million per episode, and the zombies are still the best in the biz, but there it is again, that complacency. And need I even mention the Transformers movies? Yeesh. As an entity, video games have finally matured and become mainstream. Back when I was a kid, I'd get bullied for playing games. I'd be a nerd, I'd be an outcast, but now, if you're a kid, you're expected to play something of some sort, and if you're into Fortnite, instead of getting your ass whooped in the playground, you're now in with the cool kids. In the time since I was a kid to now, this mad interconnectivity of all things has been playing into the game industry's hands. The online element brought what was once considered a nerdy, antisocial outcast thing out of the basement and into the playground, because all of the kids have got mobile phones now, right? This is happening because video games have reached a point in their lifespan of understanding a predictable yet reliable formula for success, with the right studio and the right avenue for funding, of course. And I've mentioned this in previous videos. If you've played video games since you were a kid, you've been alive long enough to see it, there's this creeping monotony on the horizon. Because of this, I started to believe that I was falling out of love with video games, that horrifying thought process that I was, inverted commas, growing out of video games. But I've been playing an excellent game lately that has shown me how wrong I was in that. I wasn't getting bored of the idea of playing games, I was getting bored of the games themselves. That success eating itself thing can be seen in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where entire tile sets for buildings are copy and pasted across the map. It's happened with Call of Duty, a franchise that is now happy to give you half a game and drop the story altogether. It's all corner cutting to save as much money as possible. And that great game I mentioned just then, you might have heard of it. Red Dead Redemption 2. We can all agree it's a great game, sure, we all know that. It's incredibly engaging and fun. If you've still not played Red Dead 2, I'll try and put it in perspective a little. Sometimes, in particularly beautiful games, we'll slow our character down to a walk just to take in all the hard work of the developers, the sheer artistry of it. This was the case with God of War. But eventually, as we well know, we get acclimatized to the game, and we go back to running around, and we crack on. Red Dead 2 is the first game I have ever played where I'm still walking slowly through areas after about 30 hours of play. The draw distance is incredible, distance fog just isn't there. Textures on mountains never morph as we get closer to them, and all of this on top of the hundreds of NPC interactions and random events that go down. I went to the theatre and I watched a full show that I'm convinced was fully motion captured. It was the first time in a video game I'd ever seen a character convincingly playing a stringed instrument. But the point I'm leading up to here is that this is what a video game of 2018 looks and plays like, where genuine effort is put into the project, a genuine desire to push existing boundaries and stand out. The same ethos drives CD Projekt Red, which is hardly surprising. The Witcher 3 was the first game I'd ever seen with trees that bent in the wind. This is the polar opposite of Fallout 76, where no effort whatsoever was put into the game. It's sobering to think for a moment that if games publishers weren't so hell-bent on appeasing investors with new monetization plans, their developers could produce games of this kind of quality. This Red Dead 2 quality, Witcher 3 quality. I understand that Rockstar made literally billions out of GTA 5 Online, and that money shows in Red Dead 2. Oh boy, does it show. From a deep early design phase, any studio can say, let's not copy that awesome thing, let's dare to try something new and potentially create something more awesome. That has become what a lot of publishers see as too great a risk to take, and so monotony is what we get. Here I was thinking I was growing out of video games. All that had happened was I'd forgotten how good they could be, and not realised how such creative effort has just not been mirrored in most games of the last few years. Playing Red Dead 2 makes me feel like I'm 15 years old again, because I have that same feeling of playing Oblivion for the first time. That same wonder of stepping out into the world, a true value project brimming with cutting-edge video game mechanics and graphical trickery. A world that I genuinely want to explore, as opposed to, say, Assassin's Creed, where I'll impatiently sprint through every area. I really do believe that the AAA space could be around the same level of quality as Red Dead 2 across the board, had normalization not led gaming down the path of unadulterated greed. It's that greed, of course, that prevents the gamble I just mentioned. Think of Red Dead 2 as a taste for just how good the games industry could really be in 2018 and beyond. And I know Red Dead 2 has a lot of the same, in case some of you out there are looking to shoot me down. It has the same style of mission rollout, so a carefully paced and linear story can unfold, that classic Rockstar unfurling of story missions. It has the same old shooting mechanics that date back to the original Max Payne. The Deadeye system is the same, sure. All of this is true, but have you ever played an open world game where you can initiate a little conversation with literally every and any NPC that you see? Have you ever played an open world game that all cinematic detail and prowess of, say, The Last of Us, Rockstar has shown us that level of detail, and all of the animations that come with it is no longer relegated to tightly controlled linear story games. But after all this, I wonder, if I was a 27-year-old man in the 90s, would I have the same misgivings about video games? Would I be saying I was sick of all the platformers that tried to imitate Crash Bandicoot? Who knows? Perhaps this is just what growing older with video games is. And on that note, I'm going to wrap things up there, guys. Do let me know in the comments below if you're around the same age as me, late 20s, early 30s, and maybe you feel the same way, this same fatigue with AAA gaming. It's good to know, though, thanks to Rockstar, that I'm actually not growing out of games. What a lovely relief that was. Problem wasn't with me, it was with the way that the industry has become. That safe space of reliable cash grabs has numbed me to any of the frills around them. If you enjoyed this video, don't be a stranger, go ahead and subscribe. I'm grateful for every one of you right now. It would also be really cool if you could follow my Facebook page, always popping up gaming news over there to keep you all up to date. And, well, I can't make a video for each and every bit of news that comes out. I just wish I could. Time is a factor here. Just one last thing before I go, guys. If you've been following me so far, I want to let you know that I am aware of all the crackling. It's a pain in the ass, isn't it? Well, it turns out I can't play the game of YouTube for free. The crackling is the result of my shitty freeware editor. Part of the editing process, it just ends up resulting in these randomly generated artifacts, these crackles, and, well, it's shit, isn't it? So worry not, I am committed. I've just got a new video editor that I spent £100 on, and it's got all sorts of bells and whistles. So join me next time, fellow gamers, for another sesh, and hopefully a shinier video. Take care.